Hello and welcome. I am Alex Armstrong, the web designer and digital strategist for the AMICAL Consortium. This webinar is part of our online events, a committee-led initiative to provide webinars and other online events on topics of interest to AMICAL members. More details are available on the AMICAL website and on AMICAL Connect. Today we'll be talking about where to begin with digital collections. Presenting and answering questions will be the members of AMICAL's Digital Collections Committee. We'll start with a presentation by Ryder Kouba and Stephen Urgola. Ryder is the committee's chair, and he also happens to be the Digital Collections Archivist at the American University in Cairo. And Stephen Urgola is the University Archivist, also from the AU in Cairo. Their presentation will be followed by a few words about how AMICAL can support member projects for digital collections. The consortium's intrepid director, Jeff Gima, will deliver this part. Last but not least, Demetra Papaconstantinou, the college archivist of the DIRI, the American College of Greece, will also be joining us today. After the presentations, we'll have a Q&A, and you'll be able to ask questions from the committee members. To participate through the chat and to ask questions, you'll need to sign into YouTube with a personal account. We'll be taking shared notes as we go along. The link to these is in the video's description. All right, let's get started. Ryder and Stephen, take it away.
Hi everyone. I'm Ryder Kouba. The purpose of this meeting, as Alex said, is to continue a conversation we had at AMICAL Rome about digital collections and connect with members who might be interested in working together to help make AMICAL institutions put their content online, and to start discussing potential collaborations between various institutions. Something that I'll probably say like 8 more times today is that it's really important to note that every institution in AMICAL is capable of building digital collections. We all have content right now that is suitable and interesting and will be valuable to make accessible to researchers, as well as increase the exposure of institutions and potentially AMICAL. And I think the Digital Collections Committee would want to help institutions do that. And so if you have feedback, please let us or Alex and whatnot know so we can try and help with all that. So to begin with, just to go over what digital collections are, as I said, they can be a wide variety of content that you probably already have in your library or records management office. They can be digitized paper, they can be born digital materials if professors or students are donating photos to you in JPEG formats. They can be old videos or digital videos. It can be virtually anything that has interesting content that you would like to share with the world. Additionally, something that we work on a lot is metadata, and metadata is very important, but there's a lot of leeway and freedom in how much you want to devote to that, because that's something that we spend a lot of time on because we think it's important. But sometimes, as we'll see with some examples later in the presentation, it might make sense to go a bit more minimal with that and just to make the material accessible online. So I mentioned how we all have content. Something that we've discussed incorporating in our library that you may also have is if researchers request scans, that's material you already have that may be able to be made into a digital collection. You may be able to, when you document current events, if it's like with our project on University on the Square, which we'll show later, JPEGs that people donate. Institutional deposits, we get a lot of electronic files from various offices around campus, and it may be possible to put those online quite simply. Basically, we're looking for something that we can make into a digital exhibit, since in general, most of our collections online, digital collections, are portions of a whole collection. There are a couple of exceptions, but you know, we're generally not putting up 12,000 photos. It's generally highlights that we're trying to exhibit to researchers and users around the world. I think, Steve, you want to talk about opportunities?
Sure. So I'm Steve Urgola, University Archivist at AUC. And when I began in this position in 2001, a very long time ago, I started hearing questions from people, well, what are you digitizing? what are you scanning? What are you putting online? And it was not exactly the earliest days of digitizing and digital collections, digital projects, but it was still a while back. The web was much different then. But it was kind of daunting for me to get these kind of questions. What are we going to do? What will we put online? And something I noticed in the archives was that after a few years, opportunities presented themselves for making things available as collections. And I think this is something that our partners, people at these different AMICAL institutions, can probably anticipate, that opportunities will present themselves to you. And I'll mention a few of these kind of possibilities. So at one stage in the mid-2000s, one example is that we've got donations from faculty. Faculty papers is one collecting area of the archives. And one collection is the one that Ryder is showing on screen right now. These are the photographs taken from projects, ethnology projects by an anthropologist at AUC who was active in the 1970s. And he donated all of the photos that he had taken and had scanned of his research in Egyptian villages. And so since you're all at academic institutions, it's very likely that you'll be bumping into academics, professors, students who will have done some sort of project and then end up with a mass of research material, whether large or small, and they don't know what to do with it. So they may offer it to you, and they may offer it to you in digital form or in a format that you would have to convert by scanning, for example. And this is a good example of something that would fall into your lap, and you could start out as a digital collection, just like this one here, from Nick Hopkins, the anthropologist at AUC. Other times, the opportunities that will come to you might be somewhat larger. So in 2011, January 2011, as you may have heard, Egypt had an uprising, revolution, and various members of AUC's community came together and decided, well, how are we going to document these protests at Tahrir Square near the AUC old campus? What happens with the photographs, videos that people take with their phones and so forth. And so we realized that here's this mass of material out there related to a contemporaneous event, and we have an opportunity to collect it and make it accessible. So as part of the University on the Square project, we took in photographs and videos from people. We also conducted oral histories. And it was a good way to capture material that might not have been otherwise preserved, if not captured right at the source, right at the immediate time. But that event happened. We were there, fortunately, and we were able to do something with the material that came out of that event. And in that case, almost everything was born digital. And so that could be easily uploaded and added to our digital library.
It's one of our most popular collections for researchers who can't make it to Egypt, and that's something I think AMICAL institutions may be difficult for researchers to come to you, but if you put it in a digital collection, they can view it. Sorry, Dan.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I mentioned the oral histories that were part of this project. I mentioned also coming into contact with faculty, students at your institution. We did this actually in the years before the revolution, but continuing until the present day, with a journalism professor who teaches courses in making audio documentaries. And as part of her course requirements, she wanted her students to not only produce a documentary, but then also archive the original interviews that were used in making that documentary. She also wanted to find a platform for hosting the documentaries. And so we struck a partnership. This is Dr. Kim Fox, who's been to some AMICAL events. And so each student at the end of the semester is required to upload interviews and the final documentary, not to our digital library, but to our institutional repository. And as you can see on the screen here, this is a record for one student's work product, their documentary and the interviews. And you can see the DSpace-based platform has a player, so someone can just click and listen to the interview. In this case, the students provided a little bit of metadata for the collections, a brief description and some keywords. And I think this is a good example of how you don't necessarily need a dedicated digital library system, but if you have something like an
It looks like we have just lost our featured speakers. We were warned that this might happen because apparently they occasionally have some issues at AUC with power failures. So I think that's probably that's what has happened right now. So while Ryder and Stephen try and get back on track, Jeff, would it be okay if I turn the presentation over to you? Sure. And you can talk a little bit about how AMICAL members can receive support from AMICAL about moving forward their own digital collections.
Sure, thanks. And sorry that we're having to go a bit out of order because of the connection problem, but I'm going to mention just quickly a couple different kinds of support that AMICAL can either provide directly or help to facilitate. One is financial, and the other is more about consulting and connections with peers for peer-to-peer support. So first of all, for funding, the primary mechanism that AMICAL has to support projects related to digital collection building is our small grants program. And so I think Alex is going to share the link because I don't think I can easily do that myself. But the small grant program, if you take a look on our website under what we do, so I'm going to talk about a couple pages on the AMICAL website that are under the what we do category. The first one is the small grant program. And we now, as of this year, we provide funding not just for training, but also for projects. And it looks like Ryder and Steve are back and connected. So I'll put this on hold, and I'll come back and talk about the small grant program in just a bit.
Hi, Ryder. I switched this over to have Jeff talk a little bit about the
right.
AMICAL support. Are you okay to go on right now?
I think so. We don't know when we don't know why it disconnected or when it disconnected.
Okay.
Stephen did a very lovely speech, and I was like, I think we're gone.
If you could let me know where the last thing I was saying.
I am actually drawing a blank right now because I just moved into the mode of trying to move the direction. Jeff, you're muted.
Sorry, I was talking while muted. So you, Steve, you were finishing up talking about the collaboration with Kim Fox, the journalism professor.
Okay, all right. That's the very end of.
Okay. Okay. So just to recap what I was saying about working with Kim Fox was that she wanted to have her students to upload the final audio documentaries, which was her final class project, as well as the interviews on which they were based. And so she came to us, and the archives struck up a relationship with her, and it's ongoing, so that her students not only they have basically a platform to showcase their work. And in that case, we use our institutional repository for that purpose. So it shows that you can use different platforms, even different platforms at the same time, for building digital collections. So sure. Another good option for digital collections, when you have some materials that are otherwise difficult to use, I like to say that these are collections or groups of documents, groups of materials that are locked. A good example of this would be our Board of Trustees minutes at AUC. They were a collection of dozens of volumes of meeting minutes related to the university's governance over the years, dating back to the 19-teens. But they were impossible to use. If you wanted to find a topic, you had to page through hundreds of pages to see when a certain topic was brought up. We decided to have these digitized. We did use an outside vendor in this case. But we had these digitized and OCR'd. And so now we've got a collection that's accessible and it's searchable. So if we're presented with a question, for example, when did AUC sell one particular plot of land it was planning for another campus? If we didn't have information about the where and specific names, paging through all the books would have been extremely difficult. but now we can just do simple searches and locate the information that we need. This has been used not only by us, but by outside researchers. We have the minutes on our digital library. We had someone recently look for information about an old pipe organ that was in AUC's auditorium. And so he did his own search and located information about when that was installed. Ryder found reports related to the earlier AUC campus near the pyramids, which was not built. We're on the other side of town these days. So it took a resource that was extremely hard to use, but very rich, and made it accessible and usable. So another area that we're doing the sort of unlocking is with some audiovisual collections. When I first got to AUC, we found these reel-to-reel films taken by faculty in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And they were useless to us because we didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the capacity to show these. So we had these digitized by a vendor, and they're now been processed by the vendor. We have some back. We're going to do some description of them, but it will allow these otherwise locked and inaccessible resources to be used. And we think it's going to be a great contribution to AUC's 100th anniversary celebrations in a few years.
So I think Steve did a great job covering a lot of the benefits for building digital collections. I'll kind of go over a couple more from maybe my perspective as a digital archivist and managing these programs. And one of the most obvious important for me when I write my annual report is the use of materials. It's easy with Content DM and DSpace to get statistics on how often people are viewing your material, maybe where they're coming from, what collection is the most popular, which can be helpful in determining what you're going to digitize in the future. If people happen to love the postcard collection or something, you can say, okay, we're going to kind of go that direction. It's also convenient when you run into the dean to say, oh yeah, thousands of people looked at this one item, give me more money. So I think that's a big issue. In addition, like I said, just sharing it with the world. A lot of people can't make it to Cairo, but if we put our Board of Trustees minutes online, if we put our yearbooks online, alumni, researchers around the world can easily view them, share it with their friends, and get good publicity for the rare books and special collections library, as well as more usage of physical materials, because they may say, oh, do you have anything else related to Pyramids Roads campus? And Steve can say, yes, we have the maps, we have all these pamphlets or whatever that haven't been digitized yet, but either we can digitize it for them and add that to the digital collection, or they can come in and view it and see it. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship between the physical and the digital collections.
Just want to say about the yearbooks, that's an example of a digital collection where you've got a kind of built-in constituency. In our case, it's the alumni of AUC. There's a very strong alumni connection to the university. There's some very active alumni members, and they do have an interest in the university's history. They have an interest in their time back when they were students. And so by highlighting their role at AUC, we made some good connections. For example, there was an alumni homecoming a couple of months ago where we not only brought a number of the old physical yearbooks, but we also set up a laptop where we could show our digital library and show the yearbooks that had been scanned. And there was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for this. So we know that there's a user base. There's a group of people who will be accessing this material, who have gotten interest in it. It's not just of some esoteric academic value. It's something that relates and connects directly to people and directly to their relationship with the institution.
I would also add that for researchers, I know if AMICAL institutions, if you see on Twitter or Facebook or somebody's interested in historical photos of Greece, I mean, you can share it with them and drive up usage that way. And these are lovely photos, and people maybe, I'm sure there are researchers interested in the history of Greek athletics, or Greek university athletics. And so, like Steve said, a lot of we're all academic institutions, and so there are built-in constituencies. But if you're aware of researchers outside your institution who may be interested in this sort of thing. It can be very easy just to tweet a link or send them a link. And even if it's just a part of your collection, that may generate interest in seeing the rest, or it may be enough for them. But it can't hurt to have people interested in your content, and it's easiest to me for people to be interested, especially for visual content, if they can see it. So I think that's one of the big advantages. Something else I wanted to mention with Steve mentioned building constituencies is potential funding. The University of California is soliciting funds from various classes, like the class of 2000, contribute to our GoFundMe account, and we'll digitize your yearbook. We'll digitize, they aren't saying this, but we've talked about commencement videos. And so I think it's an opportunity to kind of, I don't think of the word right now, but build upon itself, where if you make this material accessible and the class says, oh, we would like more stuff from us available, maybe you can say, look, it costs money. How about you donate a little bit? And they might be willing to if it's that important to them. So I think that's an opportunity, and there are quite a few examples out there of institutions doing this, and I'll try to post some to AMICAL Connect after the presentation.
It's also, I want to say something that helps in building collections. If you mount, we found this with our physical collections or document collections. When you receive one collection, let's say on a certain area, when somebody else in the same profession, for example, will see that, oh, that architect donated his papers to this library, I think I want to donate my papers there as well. I think the same works in the digital realm, in that if someone sees that someone's photograph collection of architecture, based on their study of architecture, their explorations of the city, are in a collection, another photographer who might have similar interests might approach you to donate that as well. We're hoping for the same sort of dynamic to work with the yearbooks. When someone sees that, oh, the 1973 yearbook is there, but not the 1974, my own class year, this is what the person would say, why don't I donate my copy to be scanned? So we're hoping to build on our collections that way.
Right. One of the important reasons that we haven't touched on yet, but well, Steve kind of has with the videos, is preservation. If you have material that's fragile, falling apart, and you really don't want people to handle it, it's beneficial to digitize it both for preservation and then for access as well. So we have a map, which I like, but it's gone to bits a bit, and you can see the tape and whatnot. Now, it's not the prettiest map in the world, and it's a bit, worse for wear, but it's certainly better if somebody says, I want to see this 1932 map of Cairo. We certainly prefer they look at the digital image online rather than us pull this out of storage and unroll it and have all this issue with preservation.
We've had that with some of our architecture collections. The archives of Hassan Fatih, his material is extremely popular, and so you'll see requests to see the same documents, the same items over and over again, where in some cases we'd rather just say, well, here you can see this, this one highlight in digital format, but here's something else you may not have known about. We'll show you this in physical, just something to reduce the wear and tear of it.
And last, but well, kind of least, but last is one thing we've done with the maps, especially, but some other collections, is it makes it a bit more easy. You saw the metadata in Anatolia College and the material we had, and it can be easier to link related collection material together, or even to put them in one collection. So for example, the maps, a lot of them are from the map collection, but we also have maps from travel guides, from yearbooks, or not yearbooks, excuse me, from Creswell, from various other collections. And by building a digital collection, you can put them together and make it kind of a subject exhibit that people can view content across the width and breadth of your collections. Like if we put architecture, if there's a map from Hassan Fatih, we can put that in there, and they can don't have to go through 40 different finding aids looking for map under each one. They can see that format in one collection. So we've talked a lot about some of the benefits of building the digital collections, and hopefully you are thinking about content you have right now that is applicable and can be made into a digital collection. Something that I think is important to mention besides that we all have content is that there are thousands of pages written about digital collections in the library world. There are no shortage of PDFs with how-to guides, best practices, all this sort of information that you can build on. Library of Congress and NARA are the two. Those are both American organizations I'm most familiar with, being an American. But obviously, each country or many organizations, Europeana, they're all going to have guides. Something that I think is very helpful and that I think is good advice and something I try to do and we try to do is to not reinvent the wheel. I mean, we were talking about maps earlier today in this project, but millions of maps have been uploaded around the world. And so you don't need to necessarily create a metadata schema from scratch. There are thesaurus available that give you should call this place this name, or you call this format this name. And so you don't have to, and you shouldn't because you want things to be interconnected, but you don't have to create everything from scratch. A lot of it's plug and play. You know, I do a lot of research and see how other institutions present certain material, and if I like it, I copy, and if I don't like it, I try to think about what I don't like about it and how I'd fix it. And so you can learn a lot from other institutions. Hopefully you'll ask us questions or other AMICAL members questions, but there's plenty of content out there and plenty of examples to look at to try to figure out what you think is most effective for you and whatnot.
Right, you don't necessarily need to go to the most complex example that's in these kind of best practices documents that Ryder's talking about. Exactly. You don't necessarily need 15 metadata fields. For a simple collection, maybe simple photograph collection, a simple title and listing of the photographer. That might be all that's necessary. So you can do things at a more modest scale, so as your resources allow.
So I really like AUB's political poster party or collection, which I think could be a very interesting, maybe collaborative project between different institutions. And this, to me, is great for researchers. It's an image, they can see what it is. You don't need 20 metadata fields for something like this. I think this is great. I also opened, this is at Princeton University, and they are very minimal. And so this is John F. Kennedy, the former president of the United States, part of his digitized collection. And as you can see, this is not like super fancy $30,000 camera scanning. I mean, this is a photocopy, but a lot of researchers they want to know what was written. They aren't so interested maybe in how gorgeous this document was or anything. They're interested in the informational value. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, is that the projects can be as intricate or as simple as you want. The important thing is to figure out why you're putting them online for access and try to reach that in an efficient way, I would say. So Steve mentioned how we have two different systems. We have both the digital library, which is content DM-based, and DSpace, our institutional repository. And so there are a lot of systems out there too. And that's something else I think AMICAL, we can communicate with each other to either to get help setting things up or running systems, but also just, I see you all are running Content DM, how do you like it? Do you have advice on the best practices? I see you did, some institutions, my former institution did a lot of web editing with Content DM, with CSS. And so I think, you can email them, or if you see something somebody's doing, we can talk to each other about how to best use systems. I made that too complicated. And there are a lot of systems out there. And there are a lot of resources, again, both within AMICAL and outside of AMICAL, to help you make those decisions and get up and running with them. I think I've talked about most of this. So basically, I think I'm looking at my notes and I've talked about the 3 bottom bullet points already. Basically, I think for me at least, it's about determining what you want to make accessible and not, reinventing the wheel, making everything necessarily the most beautiful object ever. If you have a bunch of black and white photocopies to digitize, maybe that can be a really quick and simple project that you scan, OCR, and put online with minimal metadata. If it's searchable, you don't really need perhaps to have quite so much metadata. People can enter names and keywords in that. Basically, there's a ton of flexibility within digital collections, and I think the trick is just figuring out what level is right for this particular collection and this particular institution, and asking for advice and seeing what other people do, because there's a lot of resources out there.
Right. And I think just one thing to think about is just to keep your eyes open, your ears open for any of the kind of opportunities that will present themselves to you. I think you're bound to find something that lends itself to a digital collection, whether it's through a partnership or through something that allows you to make a connection to help showcase your institution. So, and we'll be happy to answer some questions a bit later in the program.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ryder and Stephen. That was wonderful. I'll move us now back or forward to have Jeff talk a little bit about the forms of support that the AMICAL Consortium can offer its members. So take it away, Jeff.
Okay, thanks. So just picking up where I left off, I was starting to talk about the small grant program and the kind of funding that makes available to AMICAL members who might be interested in starting or possibly expanding, but supporting a local digital collection project. So just a couple of quick details about the scope and the nature of the applications that can be received, I guess, for small grants. Again, I mentioned that we're funding both professional development, so training. You could apply for funding for training to attend a training program or to bring someone to train on digital collection building at your institution. The members that are eligible to apply for small grant funds are full or affiliate members. So you would need to be from a full or affiliate member institution. The range of budgets that can be funded are from 500 euros up to 4,000 euros. And there's a couple of special cases that I'll just mention really quickly. If you have a very small project that doesn't have, has a very minor financial component to it of less than 500 euros, you can apply for what we're calling a micro grant, which has kind of streamlined procedures for applying and reviewing those. And then if you have a larger project where the budget exceeds 4,000 euros, that's possible too, but there are specific constraints, conditions that have to be filled for the larger projects. In particular, you have to really argue that the project is going to be locally transformative or have some kind of impact that spans multiple AMICAL institutions. That's not, the impact is not just being felt at your own institution. The kinds of resources that funding can be used for through the small grant program, it's pretty open, but some examples could be things like software, hardware, licenses, materials, student labor to help work on projects, but basically anything that's essential to moving the project forward is potentially fundable. The criteria for evaluating the small grant applications is listed on the website. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I wanted to just draw people's attention to a couple things that we're going to be new criteria that we'll be adding to the list of criteria that are already on the website, and this is intended primarily just to help ensure that the projects are successful. So one of the things we'll be adding to the criteria that's not showing there yet is that we want in your application, you need to demonstrate that the project leader or the team working on the project has adequate experience or expertise, or is showing how they're going to acquire that expertise through training or consultation in order to be able to lead the type of project that's being proposed. And the other thing that we'll be adding to the criteria that we're expecting, we're discussing this right now, but we'll probably be adding more reinforcing the criteria about timelines and milestones. And so when you apply for a small grant, you need to you'll need to be more specific about what you're expecting to accomplish and by when. And related to that, we'll be asking small grant applicants that we fund to provide very brief periodic interim reports on the progress towards those milestones. And so this is not about assessing your projects, really. It's about helping to make sure that the projects are successful. And so what we're trying to do with that is to have a way during the process of the project, during the life cycle of the project at the interim stages, we want to have a way to be able to spot difficulties that might be coming up, and to suggest to you resources, maybe put you in touch with peers that you might be able to consult with to help get past whatever difficulty you might be having with your project, if you are having issues. So again, it's not about trying to get you to write long reports. These will be very brief, but this is just about trying to help make sure that your project is successful. A couple projects that we've recently funded that I just wanted to mention to give you some examples of things that are currently happening. So at American University of Central Asia, we just funded several small grant projects related to digital collections on digitizing. One is called Digitizing Perestroika in Kyrgyzstan. Another is another collection that's being built is on the Mesolithic age of Kyrgyzstan, new discoveries and dates. And another collection that's being built is called Cultural Heritage of Kyrgyzstan in Digital Form. At AUC, we recently funded a project which is not purely a digital collection project, but it's the Life 101 project that Kim Fox in the journalism department is running. And part of that, I thought I would mention, involves digital collection that'll be built out of the podcasts that are produced by the students. So another type of digital collection that will be helping to supporting the development of. Aside from the funding, there's another kind of support that AMICAL can help provide, and maybe in some cases more meaningful. That's providing support and consultation, in particular peer-to-peer support, getting advice on your project and feedback. So there's at least 3 ways that this can currently happen. One is that if you have, and this I'll start from the simplest and maybe go to the more complex, but at the simplest level, if you have a question related to a digital collection that you're working on, or just an idea or a project that you're thinking about, post your idea on Connect, on AMICAL Connect. It'll be open to other members, any member with an interest or expertise that they might be able to lend to help answer your question or give you feedback. Can reply to that, but in particular the digital collection committee members, so Ryder, Stephen, Demetra, and Alex and myself also will be watching those, and to the extent that they're available, we'll reply to them with feedback. If they don't see that, if they don't see a question that's come up on Connect, Alex and I will sort of direct their attention to it. So that's a nice way to get feedback from the committee, but also from AMICAL members at large that might have expertise to offer. So the second level, I guess, another channel that you can use for getting support is to fill out our digital initiatives interest form that I think Alex is sharing the link for. And so this is a form where you can, let me just sort of bring this up myself so I can look at it. It's a very simple form. There's just basically one box for you to fill out, and that's to describe briefly the project or area of interest that you're working on. It's for digital initiatives of any kind, but you could use this for sharing a digital collections project that you're working on. And you might or might not have a specific question that you, or issue that you try and raise that you're looking for help or a consultation on. What we'll do is we'll use that to assess how AMICAL might be able to support that project. This is very open-ended at this point, so you could kind of idea or question related to a digital collections project into that form. We'll take a look at it and see if there's some way that AMICAL might be able to support that project. Possibly by connecting you with a peer that we happen to know is working in the same area or has expertise related to that, or someone that might potentially be a collaborator, or maybe suggest a resource related to that, or maybe try and help you to frame a small grant proposal, for example. That could go in multiple directions at that point. So a third channel that you might use is a bit more more substantial. You could invite an AMICAL peer to, whether it's one of the digital collections committee members or someone else that you've identified that has relevant experience and expertise. But you could invite an AMICAL peer to come visit your institution to help you get started with a project, help set up a platform, help plan your project. It could be, the type of help could be could come in many different forms. But the idea is this peer-to-peer consultation where you bring in someone to your institution. We can, if funding is necessary for that, for the travel, then you could certainly apply for a small grant for that kind of project as well. And that's all I have to say for AMICAL support.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And at this point, I think we've concluded the presentation components of this webinar. So what I'd like to do now is to open up the floor, so to speak, for questions. Let me see, I think we've had some questions already. Okay, Omar Faroud has asked a question for Steve. What type of machines/scanners are used to digitize print items?
Sure.
You can get that?
I got that. Well, Ryder, actually, I'll throw it to you since it's...
So we have a fairly well-appointed digitization lab. We have a couple of flatbed scanners, Epson 10,000 XLs, which are what we mostly use for printed material. It's like a pretty normal scanner size you would see. We're also very lucky in that we have a large format scanner for maps and architectural drawings that is very large. If you saw those maps, it rolls through. And then we also, a lot of times for printed material, especially fragile material where we don't really want to press down the spine, or we don't want to press down the spine, essentially. We have a camera stand that we attach just a regular digital camera to, and have some photographic lights and take pictures. Though the photography especially is a bit fancier than it needs to be. University, my alma mater, the archive there just had a regular point-and-click digital camera they gave to researchers to take pictures with, who would then give the memory card back to the staff, and they would build their digital collection that way. So if the main goal is what you envision the use being, especially for printed materials or typewritten materials, if you imagine the information being very valuable, but it doesn't really matter how it looks, like we saw with the Princeton scans, then I think a digital camera, a very simple scanner, or even if you have a photocopy machine that can create PDFs, it really depends on the use. If you have a big art book or medieval manuscript with miniature drawings that you need the cutter to really pop, it's probably going to be a bit more complicated and expensive to digitize that.
Demetra, I think you wanted to chime in and ask a question about the scanner.
Yes, thank you. Is it right to presume that if you have difficult formats, then it is better to use outside vendors? And I was just wondering how much one should invest on scanners and equipment. Your experience, or maybe the experience of other universities, I think would be helpful for people who start.
Sure. Well, our experience with vendors, there were certain factors that led us to use vendors. So for those trustees minutes for AUC, we found that the best set of minutes, the one that was most complete and in best shape, was not in Cairo, but actually in the New York office for AUC. That was the official copy of the minutes. So we used a local vendor in New York. I had a previous colleague at AUC who had relocated to New York and was doing some of her own digital projects and had knowledge of a vendor, and so we eventually engaged that vendor for the project. So that was a situation where the location factor was important. For our reel-to-reel films, we couldn't find a local vendor in Egypt, and so we sent them to a vendor in the States based on different companies that I had met with at conferences, that sort of thing. The materials themselves were quite complex. We've been looking at vendors in Egypt, though, for material where the equipment is available. So for video cassettes, for example, we're looking at partners here. We're also looking within the institution. So for the videotapes, AUC has a television and digital media training center, the ADHEM Center. And so they do actually have the equipment for digitizing videos. We had some equipment in the library, but it wasn't producing the results we wanted. But we found out that the center had exactly what we needed. They provided good quality digitized recordings of the videotapes. And so we struck up a partnership with them. So sometimes you could find a partner within your institution. Before we had that large rolling scanner that Ryder mentioned, the biology department here at AUC had a similar piece of equipment. This is upwards of 10 years ago or so. And so we had actually started digitizing some architectural plans by using the biology department scanner, coming up with a relationship with them.
But is it fair to say that you know, a decent camera and a decent scanner should be part of an archive, or you know, you should have some basic equipment and then go and from there on? I don't know.
I mean,
Or
to me,
can...
Go ahead.
No, sorry.
I mean, just a basic desktop scanner, which I think are $100, $200 maybe in the US now. I don't live in the US, I'm not sure. But something like that, I mean, at the very least, if a researcher wants, you know, maybe you can't do so many, but if somebody wants, you know, 50 pages, it's probably possible on a smaller scanner, or even just as Steve said, for mentioned in-house use. I mean, we have, you may need to digitize a couple pages in OCR so you can search it or something. So I think it's probably a good idea. Or even just Facebook posts, Twitter, you're probably going to need digital images for something to promote your archive and preservation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question that's sort of similar. I think you've sort of tackled it. I'm just going to read it out in case there's something else you want to say about this. The question is from Eleni Muskeftaropoulou, and I am Greek, so I should be able to read that. Eleni Muskeftaropoulou. And she asks from ACT, and she asks, what do you suggest is a better solution for digitization projects? Do you suggest outsourcing, vendors, or local, using existing human equipment, etc. resources? I think underneath this there's another question, which I guess has to do with the level of with the level that the institution, the resources that the institution has. Obviously, you know, at AUC, you know, they have you guys, so obviously since they have you guys, they are going to use you. But for smaller institutions which don't have dedicated positions, I think there is a genuine question about, is it better to, you know, maybe ask for fund money and then use it to pay a vendor, or use this fund money to actually, you know, slowly start my own archive know-how.
Okay, you were breaking up, so we weren't sure if we lost our connection. I mean, I think it depends on the institution and project. If it's a really large project, like Steve said, board trustees minutes, which are thousands and thousands of pages, I mean, that's kind of a vendor project. I mean, I don't think very many institutions, even Princeton, Harvard, I'm pretty sure they're probably go-to vendors for those projects, just because they have the capability to do it quickly and efficiently. And it's probably gonna be cheaper than hiring students to do that much work. And like Steve said, also format can matter a lot. Like we cannot physically do VHS in our office, so we have to work with other areas on campus or vendors. But no, I don't think there's anything wrong with going to a vendor. I know there are horror stories of the vendors, so you just have to kind of make sure they're doing what you want to do and meeting quality standards. But
and I think, again, it's helpful to look within your institution, not only your library, but the larger university, and just see what else is out there. So for the oral histories that we did, after the interview was recorded, we performed some audio editing to correct sound quality, turn the larger size file into a more accessible file, MP3. And so we found work-study students. We hired work-study students who are members of the music technology program at AUC. They had experience with audio editing. We hired them on, and they took care of our audio editing for us. We do have a staff member who's been trained in it, but he doesn't have the time to do as much of the editing as we need. So there are resources within your institution that could be drawn upon before you look to an outside vendor.
Steve's talking reminded me, we have worked with the French Institute in Alexandria to digitize content, some newspapers, and we said you can put these on your website since you digitize them, and we get a copy as well. I know in the States where I work, my alma mater has many universities around it, and there was a pool of equipment that they could all draw from for digitization or playing material. So beta players, Betamax players, things like this, that working with other institutions. So that may be possible in your situation, or maybe not, but it's something to explore at least to see if there are areas or institutions around you that can also you can work out an arrangement with.
Cool. Thanks for your answers. This is a question that says quickly, and I don't know that it's one that can be answered quickly, but maybe you have some wisdom to hand down. Could you quickly share your experience of working with DSpace and Content DM as you use both of them for your repository and special collections?
Steve?
Well, I'll start. We started out with DSpace first. We call it AUC DAR here at AUC, and it served its purpose for hosting some collections. We actually put a collaborative project there. The Philanthropy Research Center at AUC, the Gerhardt Center, got a grant to mount a Muslim digital philanthropy library. And so members of that unit at AUC scanned material, and then it was mounted into our institutional repository. We found that it didn't necessarily offer as good viewing options as Content DM would, and so for that reason we adopted Content DM a few years later. But for the initial purpose, it sufficed. We actually still have some digital collections in our DSpace repository. We have architectural plans there. They've been great as far as getting access to the material. They've been great in terms of searchability. People do a Google search for Hassan Fatih, the architect, and they will be able to see AUC DAR, our DSpace platform, as one of the options, and they're able to access the collections that way.
Yeah, I manage both of them, and I think there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, like Steve said, DSpace for many institutions serves as the digital library, and I think, like we've talked about, our philosophy is our digital collections are pretty exhibit heavy. I mean, they're not entire collections generally, and they're very visually interesting. And we didn't, well, I wasn't here yet, but I agree with Steve in my predecessor's assessment. DSpace, in the set that without editing the website too much, didn't provide that. And Content DM does. I mean, I work with Content DM a lot, and Steve may. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, we're all librarians, but you have to be a bit OCD to deal with it, because if there's an extra space or an extra character anywhere in your metadata, it will not upload. So it's a labor of love, and I enjoy my job, so it's okay, but it's, visually, I mean, I think it's okay. I don't like everything about it. Sometimes I think it's a bit wonky, and just the homepage with the carousel and things like this, I think it could be a bit more visually appealing, but it's not a huge deal. It does a good job when we need to find something, we're able to find it. It does a good job with presenting material. So I think it does the job.
Yeah, for searchability, searching the trustees minutes, that's something I think there would have been more limitations doing keyword searches in the DSpace platform versus Content DM. I think Content DM allowed zooming in documents, as Ryder showed with the map. That's very useful. But in terms of audio presentation, DAR, DSpace was great. Kim Fox's classes, they're still uploading student projects there as part of that digital collection. And so it does have some multimedia capacities. Right. So it's got benefits too.
Yeah, I think both are viable, good platforms, and some institutions have a mix, some have one, some have the other, and then there are other programs available as well. And so there's a lot of choices out there, and I would recommend just exploring them and seeing what you like about some. And they're all editable. My previous institution, like I said, did a whole revamp of content DM. So they got rid of pretty much all of the basic settings and totally revamped the visual appearance. So if you have CSS skills or know somebody who does, you can. There's a lot of flexibility, and so you can kind of build it into what you want if that's what you desire. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that was great. Shashan Abre from LAU wrote in the chat that she would like to share her experience, or their experience rather, institutional experience with DSpace. And I'm thinking that may be an opportunity for a future event where we can maybe get some people who can, because I think there's a lot of technological anxiety around digital collections beyond just the process of digitizing collection or getting born digital material. Just where do you put it, and how does that lock you in, or how does that impact the work? So maybe hear some experience from other AMICAL members would be a useful way of going about this.
I think it would be interesting to talk to other people about their DSpace setup, because I know when we showed Anatolia Cottage with the photos of Greece, I mean, I like that theme for that purpose better than what we have. And so I don't like that like Steve said, it's not zoomable, and it's pretty easy to save the image, so there's maybe copyright concerns about that. But I like the setup, and I think it's, like I said, completely possible to make DSpace your main digital library if that's what you choose to do. But content DM is good too. So it will be interesting to compare notes about how people are utilizing DSpace and get advice and see what other people have.
All right. I'll ask another. It's a very nuts and bolt question, and hopefully you can sort of answer it fairly quickly. If not, I think this will be our last question. I'm not sure if there's been any more since I've been looking at this. The question is from Bushra Jazwa from Foreman Christian College in Pakistan. She's asking whether your digital collections are in Roman or non-Roman script, and in particular, if it's in Arabic, is there OCR software that is available?
It's almost all in English. There is OCR software available. We use Abby Fine Reader, which is ABBYY Fine Reader. I cannot vouch for its accuracy since my Arabic is really, really bad, but there is OCR software available. Almost all our metadata is in English. Some of it is in Arabic, but in general, we've gone with English or transliteration, which is par for the course for our descriptive practices across the archives and library. We want to be consistent with that, and it's unusual to see too much Arabic script in our catalog.
Right, that's the case with the metadata for the some collections though, like the oral histories that are conducted in Arabic. We mount a transcript that is an Arabic script transcript, and that is also OCR and searchable. Yeah. So the metadata may not be in Arabic for a certain interview, but if it was conducted in Arabic, the transcript will be, and it's searchable in that way. Yeah.
Cool. All right. We seem to have reached our allotted time. We're actually just a couple minutes over. So I think I'll wrap us up about here. I'd like to thank Ryder, Stephen, Demetra, and Jeff for sharing their wisdom with us today. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, or if one comes to mind later, we can always keep talking on AMICAL Connect. So have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.